Natalie stepped through the glass doors of Murata Global's headquarters with quiet steps and calm eyes. Her clothes were simple gray slacks, a buttoned white blouse slightly wrinkled from travel, and old black flats that made a soft squeak on the marble floors. She looked like someone there to deliver papers, not someone expected at the executive networking event swirling just beyond the lobby. She was scanning for the HR desk when it happened. Oops, a voice rang out full of sarcasm. A cold splash hit her face. A full cup of Coca-Cola slammed into her chest and neck, dripping down her blouse, seeping into her collar. The sticky soda clung to her like shame. Laughter broke out around her. Oh no, sorry. The intern who threw it grinned without even trying to look sorry. Thought you were janitorial. The liquid clung to her hair, dark and damp. People pointed, some giggled, a few took photos. One woman whispered, "She looks like she just crawled out of the basement." Natalie didn't flinch, not even once. She blinked slowly, her hazel eyes soft but unreadable, and reached up only to tuck a stray hair behind her ear. She looked at no one in particular, especially not at the smirking intern still twirling his empty cup. And then, silently, she walked toward the restroom. Before we continue, please do subscribe to my channel. Whispers floated like dust behind her as she passed the front desk. Who is she? She doesn't even have a badge. Maybe an assistant or catering. Natalie stood before the mirror, dabbing her neck with dry paper. Towels. Her blouse clung awkwardly to her skin, stained dark by the syrupy soda. The thin fabric had turned nearly transparent under the lighting. She stared at her reflection quietly, her shoulders still, and her expression almost too calm. From outside, as the sounds of music and clinking glasses leaked in the corporate networking mixer, said he was in full swing. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She simply rinsed her hands, dried them, and buttoned her blazer on oversized gray one that had seen better days. It didn't hide the soda stains, but it covered just enough. When she stepped back into the lobby, no one looked at her. She walked, past the crowd like a ghost. Only one person noticed, an older woman with a sharp silver bob standing by a marble pillar. Her eyes locked on Natalie's for a long second. She didn't laugh, didn't judge, she just watched. Natalie offered a polite nod. The woman who everyone called Margaret in hushed tones nodded back, something unreadable passing between them. "Hey, Coke girl," someone called. The voice came from the same intern. Jared, his slicked back hair catching the overhead lights. He leaned against the buffet table, laughing with a group of junior executives. He wore a navy blazer and a gold pin that marked him as a corporate legacy, the kind that inherited boardroom seats, not earned them. He twirled the Naumdi cup in his hand. "Next time, wear black," he shouted. Natalie paused for a moment, her back to him. Her jaw clenched just for a second, but her shoulders stayed relaxed. She kept walking. More laughter followed her steps. Some people chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to join in. Others just turned their faces, pretending they hadn't seen. At the elevator, she reached out to press the button when a woman in stilettos and a sharp red dress cut her off. "Service. Staff use the backlift," the woman said, her platinum blonde hair glinting. "This one's for employees." Natalie turned to look at her. No anger, no sarcasm, just those calm, steady eyes. "I'll take the stairs," Natalie replied softly. Her voice was warm, polite, but something in her tone made. The woman's smirk twitched. Natalie turned and walked. Away again and again. Nobody followed. As Natalie climbed the marble staircase, her flats made soft sounds against the stone. She passed glossy company posters that showcased Murata Global's greatest achievements. Multinational expansions, billion-dollar acquisitions, photos of smiling, suited men, cutting ribbons or shaking hands, men who once stood next to her grandfather, but today no one recognized her. She didn't wear her family name. She didn't flash wealth or demand attention. She blended in like wallpaper, and that was exactly what she wanted. Natalie stopped at the landing and looked down at the lobby below. People laughed, mingled, and sipped champagne. No one knew. Not yet. She placed a hand lightly on the railing, her fingers tapping a rhythm only she understood. Her breath steady, her gaze thoughtful in her blazer pocket. A letter sat folded neatly. It was from her father. It began with 3 simple words. Don't tell them. She wouldn't. Not yet. Not until the right moment. Because this wasn't just about hurt feelings or spilled Coke. This was about a company that had lost its soul, and Natalie Carter had just arrived. To find it again, Natalie stepped into the wide hallway that wrapped around the lobby, her blazer still damp where the soda had soaked through. She passed glass-walled offices filled with clicking keyboards and whispered gossip. She's still walking around? Gone home. Heard she's an intern. Late 20s, probably failed out of law school or something. Their words weren't meant to reach her, but they did. Not that it mattered. She kept walking, back straight, fingers steady on the strap of her tote bag. A few heads turned. Some people smirked. One woman sneered and whispered to her coworker, "You'd think she'd at least change her clothes. What a joke." Natalie reached the end of the hallway. where the HR department's glass entrance glittered with polished lettering just outside. A young man with gel-slicked hair and a too-bright tie leaned against a printer. He glanced up from his phone and snorted when he saw her. "Lost?" he said, not moving an inch, to let her pass. Natalie smiled gently, just a faint lift of the corner of her lips. "Not at all," she said. He opened his mouth to reply, but a soft click-click-click of heels interrupted him. It was Margaret, the same silver-haired woman from before, approaching from behind, her steps deliberate, her eyes locked on Natalie. Margaret said nothing at first. She just reached into her leather bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. It was sealed with a red band and stamped in bold block letters. Confidential, without explanation. She handed it to Natalie. "Direct from the chairman," she said quietly. "You're to review this before tonight's closed-door meeting?" Hallway froze. An intern walking by actually paused mid-step. Natalie didn't blink. She simply took the folder and nodded. Understood. The slick-haired guy by the printer made a noise halfway between a scoff and a question. "Wait, meeting chairman?" Margaret gave him a look that shut him up instantly. Her gaze had weight like she'd seen far too many corporate clowns. In her lifetime, then without another word, Margaret turned and walked off. Natalie stood there for a second, the folder heavy in her hands. When she looked down at it, her fingers didn't tremble. Not even slightly. People stared now. Not with laughter, but with curiosity and maybe. Uneased, Natalie tucked the folder gently into her tote and continued down the hall. Her pace slow, unbothered, like nothing had changed at all, but it had everything. Had Natalie ducked into the break room to dry off what was left of the cola stain. The room was bright, filled with stainless steel coffee machines and neatly stacked mugs that no one ever put away. A small group of marketing associates stood near the counter, pretending not to see her. Then one spoke. "Hey, thrift store you?" "Missed a spot," said a man with a bright striped tie. Leaning with a smirk, Natalie didn't respond. She reached for a paper towel. Another associate, a woman with perfect nails and oversized sunglasses on her head, raised her phone. "Click office." "Fail of the day?" she giggled. "I'm posting this." The room filled with soft laughter. Natalie paused, hand still on the paper towel. Then slowly she turned to face them. Her eyes didn't narrow. She didn't frown. She simply asked, "Is that all you've got?" The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was soft, almost brittle. The man in the striped tie blinked, then looked away. Natalie wiped her neck, tossed the towel in the bin, and calmly exited the break room. Behind her, one of the junior associates whispered, "Who is she?" No one answered because no one really knew yet. Back in the hallway, Natalie headed toward the elevator again. This time a group of junior account managers stood nearby, Vanessa among them, their signature platinum blonde bob and red dress. That turned heads wherever she went. Vanessa's laugh was sharp. It's too loud and always just a little forced. When she saw Natalie, she tilted her head and smiled with fake sweetness. "Oh, hey," she called out, loud enough for others to hear. "This elevator's still for staff. Trainees like you should really use the service lift. You know, the one by the dumpsters?" The others laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was safer than staying silent. Natalie stopped walking. She didn't speak, didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped aside from the elevator and gently pushed open the stairwell door. She turned her head slightly. "I like the stairs," she said. "Keeps me grounded." Her voice was soft. Like she was telling a secret only the smart ones would understand. Vanessa blinked. Her smile faltering just slightly. Natalie disappeared. Into the stairwell, her steps measured and slow. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Inside, alone with her thoughts, Natalie whispered to herself, "Soon they'll all understand." Natalie reached the third floor using the stairs. The hallway smelled faintly of new paint and fresh coffee. She kept walking, her hand brushing the strap of her tote bag. Her mind calm as still water. Just outside the design department, a group of interns gathered around the vending machines. Loud voices, casual arrogance, kind of noise that only comes from people who think they'll never be held accountable. One of them spotted her. "Hey," he called, voice smug and grinning. "You dropped something." He tossed a balled-up napkin toward her feet, hit the floor near her toes, fluttering like a paper insult. The others snickered. "Pick it up, janitor lady," a girl with heavy makeup added, swirling a strand of bleached hair around her finger. Natalie looked down at the napkin. Then she looked up slowly and met the boy's eyes. Without a word, she bent down, picked up the napkin, and folded it. "Thanks for the heads up," she said gently, slipping the paper into her pocket like it was gold. Silence fell. It wasn't her words. It was the way she said them. The confidence. The calm. Like she was doing them a favor by playing along. The boy's grin faltered. One girl nudged the other. They all suddenly had somewhere else to be. Unbeknownst to the interns, someone had been watching. The facilities manager, a quiet Man in a blue polo shirt with a clipboard tucked under his arm stood halfway down the hallway. He hadn't said a word the entire time, but his eyes missed nothing. As Natalie walked past him, their eyes met. He didn't smile, he didn't speak, but he nodded just slightly. It wasn't much, but it was something. Natalie gave him the smallest nod in return and kept walking. She knew how this game worked. Everyone assumed power wore expensive watches, crisp suits, and walked like they owned the building. But real power? Real power walked quietly, watched, waited, and took notes, just like that clipboard, as she moved farther. Down the corridor, Natalie passed an open office where two employees were chatting in low voices. They stopped talking the second she neared, pretending to rearrange files. But she'd already heard them. Is that the Coke girl? She's still here? What is she carrying? Someone's dry cleaning? They snorted. Natalie didn't stop. She didn't even blink. She just adjusted. The folder in her bag let them laugh. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to remember every single name that showed their true face. The quietest places, always held the heaviest truths. Natalie opened the door to the conference room. It was empty except for a long mahogany table, polished to a shine. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp shadows across the room. She stepped in and let the door click softly shut behind her. For a few moments, she stood there in silence. Then she walked to the far end of the table, the same seat her grandfather once sat in when he launched Murata's first Midwest division. She didn't sit, though. Not yet. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed the confidential folder on the table. Her fingers brushed the edges inside. Were papers that could fire 5 executives, or elevate 10 quiet employees no one respected. The restructuring blueprint, it was everything. Natalie took a deep breath and looked out the window. Chicago's skyline stared back at her, glass and steel and sky. She thought of her mother's warning, can't save a place that doesn't want saving. But Natalie didn't believe that. She believed in watching, in listening, in timing. And right now, she was gathering what she needed, not just reports and spreadsheets, but character. This company wasn't just broken on paper. It was broken in the hearts of the people who worked here. Her hand trembled once, lightly, as she opened the folder. Inside was a handwritten note tucked between the legal. Meant not. From Margaret. From her father. They won't recognize you. That's good. Power means nothing if you don't understand the powerless. Let them laugh. Let them underestimate. You'll see who they are when they think you're no one. Natalie closed her eyes. She could hear his voice in those words, measured, calm, loving. He had led Murata through 2 decades of global expansion. He never shouted, never fired in anger. But his silence could shake. Boardrooms. She missed him, and she would do this right. Her father didn't raise her to be angry. He raised her to be deliberate. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her inside pocket. Then she looked around. The conference room again? Soon, this table would be full. People in suits and smiles, the ones who'd sneered, the ones who whispered, they would all be here. And when the moment came, they wouldn't just hear her name. They would understand her silence. She stood tall, collected the folder, and walked out her flats, making soft, confident sounds on the carpeted floor. She wasn't here to survive the cruelty. She was here to end it. As Natalie moved through the quiet corridor on the executive floor, she paused beside a framed black and white photograph, hanging alone near the elevators. She'd seen it 1,000 times growing up, though no one around her now could have guessed. It showed the ribbon cutting of Murata's very first office. Decades ago, in the center stood 2 men shaking hands. One was Murata's founder. The other, the tall gentleman with steel gray eyes and a gentle smile, was her grandfather. Natalie stared at the image. She could almost smell the pipe smoke, hear the low hum of his voice as he told her stories about this very building. Back when the floors were worn wood and the coffee always burnt, her fingers hovered just below the glass. The young assistant walking past her glanced at the photo and said dismissively, "Old men and their monuments." Natalie smiled to herself, then turned and walked away. Let them see only what they wanted. Let them think she was just a confused intern. With bad luck and a stained blouse, they had no idea that the blood of this company ran in her veins. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She was here for truth. And truth always started in silence. Down the hall, her phone buzzed quietly in her blazer pocket. She stepped into an empty, glass-walled lounge and answered. "Double quotes, Miss Carter," came a calm, professional voice. "This is Global Legal. All shares have been finalized as of this morning. You are now the legal chairwoman of Murata Global's U.S. branch." Natalie closed her eyes, not out of surprise, but gravity. "I understand," she said softly. "Tonight's formal announcement is scheduled for 7 p.m. in the main atrium," the voice added. "Board members are being notified now." You're expected to open with remarks. Natalie said nothing for a moment. Then she asked, "Do they know who I am yet?" "Only those who need to," came the reply. She hung up without a goodbye. That was enough. No need for declarations. No need to rush the reveal. Her real power wasn't in her title. It was in her patience. She looked out the window of the lounge, where the street below teemed with movement cars. People, horns, life. Up here, the office buzzed with the illusion of control. But by nightfall, everything would shift. Not with noise, not with vengeance, with structure, because Natalie Carter hadn't come to scare them. She'd come to rebuild them. She reached into her inner pocket and pulled out her father's letter again. This time, read it slowly. You will be humiliated. No, that is how truth begins. You will be judged. No, that's how character is revealed, and when you've seen them all. Child, when you've truly seen them, then show them who you are. Her chest rose slowly as she took a deep breath. The smell of old paper mixed with the cool, sterile air of corporate ambition. Her father had died a year ago, but his words stayed sharper than any voice. Mocking her down the hall, he had chosen her not. Just because she was his daughter, but because she saw things differently. She didn't talk to impress. She listened to understand. That's why he trusted her with the company, not the flashiest, not the loudest, but the one who could see through polished glass and find the cracks. She folded the letter carefully and placed it back into her pocket. Tonight, she wouldn't arrive as the mystery intern. She would return as the soul of Murata Global, and no one would be ready. As she walked back toward the main floor, a group of senior staff brushed past her near the elevators. One of them, a large man, with cufflinks that screamed inherited wealth, didn't even pause as he muttered, "Still haven't fired that soda girl?" The others chuckled. "She probably thinks she's networking," said another. "Poor thing." Natalie stood just a few feet away, folder tucked under her arm. It's listening, invisible, forgettable. That's what they thought. The elevator dinged and they stepped inside without noticing her. As the doors closed, one woman added, "Wait until she finds out this place eats soft ones alive." Natalie didn't react. She adjusted her collar, wiped a faint soda stain still lingering near her neck, and smiled softly. Let them laugh. Let them sharpen their words. Tonight, they would all be sitting at the same table as her, and when she spoke, they wouldn't hear Soda Girl. They would hear the chairwoman of Murata Global. Not with revenge in her voice, but purpose. Because she had seen who they truly were when they thought no one important was watching. And now, their masks would fall. One by one. The boardroom was colder than Natalie remembered. It wasn't just the air. It was the mood. 12 seats lined the gleaming black table. 12 men and women in dark suits, murmuring among themselves, fidgeting with their watches. Tablets and egos. They were all here for the emergency announcement that had been scheduled for 7 p.m. Not one of them had expected her. Natalie stood behind the tinted glass wall, invisible for now, watching the expressions of those who had once whispered her father's name with awe and later, with impatience. "He built this place," she whispered, almost to herself, "and they've spent years trying to turn it into their playground." The head of finance leaned back in his chair and scoffed. Why couldn't this have been an email? Natalie's assistant, a quiet man in a charcoal blazer, stepped into the room and cleared his throat. "The new chairwoman will join you momentarily." The room fell quiet. Half the board looked confused, the rest nervous. Natalie waited one more breath. Then she walked in. Every chair turned. Every smirk froze. Every face changed, because Soda Girl, intern girl, Invisible Girl was now at the head of the table, and they had no idea how to recover. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam a folder. Natalie Carter simply walked to the head seat, adjusted the microphone, and offered a soft smile that carried the weight of everything they'd overlooked. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, deep with grace. "My name is Natalie Carter, daughter of Edward Carter, granddaughter of Walter D. Carter, the founding partner of Murata Global." Dead silence. 2 board members sat straighter, suddenly pale. "I'm sure this is a surprise to many of you," she continued, "which is fair. I was hired under another name on purpose, because I needed to see, not your resumes, but your reality." The man who mocked her soda stains looked down at his hands. Natalie's eyes swept across the room, not harsh but certain. "In the past 3 weeks I've been overlooked, ridiculed, dismissed, and underestimated." She paused. "I think. You for that?" A murmur. "I now know who in this room leads with integrity and who leads with illusion." The silence pressed heavier than concrete. Natalie leaned slightly forward, slightly forward. "This company is no longer run by fear. It will be rebuilt with purpose, with humanity, and with accountability." Then she sat, and still. Not a single person moved. The man who had made the soda girl joke earlier forced a cough and tried to regain his footing. Natalie, Miss Carter, surely you understand that business is business. No hard feelings. This was all just performance review, she said, cutting him off gently. He blinked. What? She slid a folder across the table. His name was stamped on the front. Your tenure at Murata ends tonight, she said quietly. Full severance. Legal signed off 2 hours ago. You could hear the man's breath catch. He opened the folder, his hands trembled. But I can't, Natalie said, without malice, and I have. No one laughed now, no one smirked. The room was stoned. Natalie stood again and said gently, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to clean the mirror, so this company can finally see itself. The man stood slowly, face red, lips tight. He left without a word, and the door clicked shut behind him. Natalie looked at the rest. This is not about fear. It's about clarity. Across the table, a senior VP1, who had once avoided eye contact when Natalie spilled coffee, cleared her throat. I owe you an apology. Natalie turned toward her. In the cafeteria that day, I saw what happened. I didn't speak up. I should have. Natalie nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. The woman looked down her, voice low. It's just that. In this place, silence feels safer. Natalie took a breath. That's exactly what I want to change. The woman's lip trembled. For a moment, there was no boardroom, just people, flawed, afraid. And finally, being seen, Natalie walked around the table and gently placed her hand on the woman's shoulder. Silence won't protect you here anymore, she whispered. A truth will. The woman nodded, eyes glistening, and across the room, quiet sense began to settle in. This wasn't the same company anymore. The ghost of Murata's past had returned. Not to haunt them, but to heal them. And she wore no crown, only quiet strength. The following morning, the office didn't look any different. The walls were still sterile. The desks still clicked with keyboards. But the air had changed. People glanced around as if they were waiting for something. Whispers passed from one desk to the next. Did you hear what happened last night? They said she's the founder's daughter. No way. That was her? Yes, the girl from the kitchen. Natalie walked into the lobby without an entourage. No bodyguards. No high heels. Echoing power? Just quiet flats, a soft beige blouse, and a warm smile. The receptionist looked up, mouth parting slightly. Good morning, Natalie said, as if she'd worked there forever. Then she added, Would you like to join me for coffee in the break? Room. The receptionist blinked. Me. Natalie nodded. Yes, you. I'm trying to meet everyone. A ripple of disbelief followed her like wind following a whisper. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a return. And it started not in boardrooms but in break rooms. In the corner of the cafeteria, Natalie sat with the receptionist, a young data analyst, and a janitor named Rico. They spoke of ordinary things, commutes, favorite tea flavors, terrible vending machines. No one pulled out phones. No one rushed to perform. It was safe. Then Rico said quietly, I've worked here 11 years, never even spoken to someone from the top floor. Natalie looked at him, genuinely surprised. Why not? He shrugged. They don't usually come down here. She smiled. Well, I used to sweep floors too. My dad made me do it every summer growing up. Said I couldn't lead people if I didn't understand what tired feet felt like. Rico's eyes glistened. Natalie continued. No position makes anyone less than. If anything, your view is clearer from the ground. That afternoon, word spread like morning sun. She had lunch with Rico. She knows what it's like to be overlooked. Shh. Ask me how my mom was doing. Every whisper built something stronger than policy. It built trust. And in places where power once hovered like a shadow, light began to stretch quietly into the corners. 2 days later, Natalie launched something the company had never seen before. It wasn't a new product or a stock acquisition. It was called the Apology Initiative. A single memo went out. This week, we encourage any employee intern to executive to acknowledge past moments where silence or disrespect hurt someone in this workplace. Apologies are welcome, private or public. There will be no punishments, only accountability. Let's clean the air so we can all breathe. Some rolled their eyes, others panicked, but a few brave souls stepped up. The HR director sent a handwritten note to a junior designer. I'm sorry I dismissed your idea in that pitch meeting last year. I remember it now, and it was brilliant. Woman in legal walked into the IT room and said, I never thanked you properly for fixing my laptop at midnight. I'm sorry. And then came the moment that shook the office. A senior manager stood in the center atrium and addressed everyone during lunch. I laughed when Natalie spilled that soda. I judged her. I'm sorry." His voice broke. "She was stronger than all of us, and I hope we grow to be worthy of her leadership." A hush fell. Then, soft clapping, then louder. Not applause for a man, applause for a culture being reborn. 3 floors above, by the window facing the city skyline, Natalie stood alone, watching, listening. She'd been through storms no one in that office could ever imagine, but what she saw now made every bruise worth it. That afternoon, as she stepped into the elevator to head down, the doors opened to reveal a familiar face. The woman in the scarf. The one who had offered her tissues in the bathroom weeks ago was standing there, clutching a paper bag. She gasped softly, then smiled. "You," Natalie smiled back. "Remembered me." "I never forgot," the woman said. "I brought lunch. For you. I never got to thank you properly for being kind." Natalie took the bag gently. "You were the only kind face I saw that day. It meant more than you know." They stood in silence for a beat, 2 women from different stories who had once met in pain. Now, they stood in power. Together, 2 weeks had passed since the storm of truth swept through the company. Natalie had settled into her, rolled but not behind a grand desk or hidden glass walls. Instead, she claimed a modest office on the 3rd floor right between finance and design. It had been her father's request before he passed. "Don't lead from the clouds," he told her once, pressing a calloused hand to hers. "Lead from the hallway where the footsteps echo. That's where truth lives." Now, in that small office, Natalie kept his worn leather, journaled beside her computer. She opened it often, not to admire his past, but to learn. One entry stood out. Like a whispered secret, "If the people working the earliest hours and leaving the latest don't smile when they see me, I failed as a leader." She read it again and again. Then she looked around the building at the janitors, the interns, the drivers, the security guards, and she made a quiet vow. "You'll all be seen now. Every single one of you." At the next monthly town hall, Natalie stood on stage. Without lights or teleprompters, just a mic. In her voice, she held up a brown envelope and smiled. "This," she said softly, "is my father's last will." Gasps rippled. "He didn't leave this company to me," she said. More gasps. "He left it to a promise." She unfolded the paper gently. "To the people who choose kindness when they don't have to, who see others when they could look away, who use power to build, not to break. If my daughter can find them, then give her everything." The silence was thick with emotion. Natalie continued. "He believed this company didn't belong to a name but to a culture. So starting today, we're launching the Legacy Council, made up of employees from every department and every floor. Not just executives, not just shareholders. It'll shape the heart of this company with me." Applause burst through the room like spring rain, tears, hugs, hope. A company once frozen by fear, now thawed beneath truth and trust. That night, Natalie sat at her father's old desk, the one she'd moved into her 3rd floor office. She opened a drawer she had never dared open before. Inside were letters, dozens, each one handwritten. To her, most were never sent. "I saw you today, sweeping the sidewalk with your sleeves rolled up. You looked so much like your mother." It ached. But one day this world will try to dim you. Promise me you won't let it. Don't become what they expect. Become what they never saw coming." Natalie's hands trembled as she read. Tears fell silently onto the ink. Her father had died before he could speak these words, but somehow it still found a way to reach her through ink, through memory, through legacy. In that moment she didn't feel alone. She felt chosen. Not by blood, but by belief. The next morning, the one who had thrown the coke returned. Yes, her. Dahlia dressed. Sharp as ever, heels, lipstick chin high. She had requested a meeting with Natalie. And to everyone's shock, it was granted. The two sat across from each other in the small 3rd floor office. Dahlia spoke first. "I came to say something I should have said a long time ago." Natalie remained calm, listening. "I'm sorry," Dahlia whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't know who you were, but that's not the point, is it? I shouldn't have treated anyone that way." Natalie nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that. I don't expect forgiveness," Dahlia added. "Good," Natalie said softly, "because it's not mine to give alone. You hurt people here. You'll have to show them, not just tell them." "But we believe in redemption." Dahlia looked up, stunned. "You'd give me a chance?" Natalie offered a small smile. "If you're willing to start from the bottom and do the work." Dahlia exhaled. It wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of her rebuild. The morning began with a knock on Natalie's door. A receptionist peeked in nervously. Natalie, there's someone from the Chronicle. The reporter Ella Marks. She wants to do a feature on you." Natalie raised a brow. "On me or on the coke incident?" The receptionist hesitated. "Both, I think." Natalie leaned back in her chair, eyes thoughtful. She wasn't a woman who craved the spotlight. But maybe, just maybe it, was time for a story like hers. To be told, not to brag, but to shift something, to hold up a mirror to the world. She stood, smoothed her sleeves and whispered, "Let's do it." Cameras rolled. The studio was quiet, the lights low, the mood intimate. Ella Marks leaned forward. "You weren't treated well, Miss Carter. You were humiliated. Most people would have. Sued or walked away. Why? Stay." Natalie smiled gently. "I didn't stay to prove a point. I stayed because this place mattered to someone I loved. My father built it to give people more than paychecks. He built it to give people pride. And I saw how far we'd strayed from that." Ella blinked. "And the woman who assaulted you?" "I offered her a second chance," Natalie said softly. "Why?" "Because someone once gave one to me. And because power without compassion is just control." The room fell silent for a long moment. Then Ella said almost to herself, "The world needs more leaders like you." Natalie didn't answer. She didn't feel like a leader, just a woman doing what was right. The interview aired at 8 p.m. sharp. By 10 p.m. the internet was on fire, clips went viral. Founder's daughter, humiliated by coworker, now runs the company with grace. She forgave the bully who threw. Kokand taught the world a lesson. This CEO just redefined power. On every platform, people commented, "THIS is leadership." Someone raised this woman's salary. "I wish my boss had 1% of her heart." Natalie stayed offline. She didn't want the noise. But her inbox filled with thousands of messages from strangers, employees, even rivals. Some thanked her. Some apologized. Some just cried and typed words saying, "You reminded me that people still matter and that meant more than anything else." Weeks later, things felt different. The office didn't just look brighter, it breathed differently. Natalie had installed a kindness board on every floor. Anyone could post thank you notes anonymously, from janitors to managers. Gratitude began flowing like morning light. Dalyu, the woman who once threw coke, was now working at the welcome desk. She greeted guests with warmth and humility. One day, she handed a visitor a badge and said, "Welcome to a company that believes in second chances." The visitor blinked. Recognizing her, and Dahlia didn't flinch, she stood tall, not proud, just honest Natalie. Watching from afar, felt a quiet joy swell in her chest. Her father's legacy had not just survived, it had evolved. And as the building buzzed with laughter, ideas, and kindness, Natalie understood. Sometimes, the world doesn't need a hero, it just needs someone to remember how to care. End of part 8. Would you like to proceed to part 9? The dinner invitation that changed everything? Just reply, continue to move forward, you said? CONTIO, ChatGPT said. Here is part 9, the dinner. Invitation that changed everything, written in for immersive. The restaurant was dimly lit and elegant. Tucked between two galleries in the old part of the city, a man sat at the window table. Older, regal, but not flashy. His suit was tailored, his posture effortless. When Natalie arrived, he stood, offered a hand, smiled. "Ms. Carter, thank you for coming." "You're Mr. Caldwell?" He nodded. "Samuel Caldwell. I used to work with your father, years ago, in the earliest days, before there was even a name on the building." Natalie blinked. Her father never mentioned a Caldwell, but she sat down, intrigued. Samuel sipped his tea. "I watched you from afar, and when I saw what happened to you, and how you responded, I saw your father again." Natalie's throat tightened. "He would be proud," Samuel said softly, and for the first time in months, her eyes welled up, not from hurt, but from healing. Dinner stretched into ours. They spoke of the past, of the building when it had no walls, of her father working late nights on a folding chair. And then Samuel leaned in. "There's something else, Natalie. I've been a silent investor in your father's company since the second year." Natalie blinked. "You what?" He chuckled. "Your father insisted on being the face. But when the bank turned him down, I backed him. Quietly. We never told anyone." She stared at him, speechless. Double quotes, and now he continued. "I want to invest again. But this time, not in the company. In you." He slid a leather folder across the table. Natalie opened it. Inside was a proposal, a funding document. At the bottom, a number. An absurdly large number. "This is," she whispered, stunned. "Samuel." Caldwell smiled kindly. "I believe in leaders who lead with grace, and I believe the world needs more of them." That night, Natalie walked home slowly, not because her heels hurt, but because her heart was full. Everything she'd endured, humiliation, the whispers, the betrayal lit, had all led here. Not to revenge, not to fortune, but to recognition. Not from crowds, but from people who mattered. She stood under a street lamp and closed Her eyes, the air was cool. The city hummed, and for the first time since her father passed, Natalie felt him near, not in memory, but in purpose. She whispered into the night, "I hope I'm making you proud." And in the silence that followed, the wind shifted gently, as if someone answered yes. Monday morning, Natalie entered the office, not through the side door, but the front. Not hiding, not in shame. She wore a soft navy blouse, her scarf pinned gracefully. Hair neatly tucked back, her steps were slow, purposeful. Staff, who once whispered, now paused mid-conversation. She wasn't angry. She wasn't proud. She was settled, like someone who had walked through fire and stepped out glowing in the boardroom. A new chair waited for her, engraved with her name. When she took her seat, not a word was spoken, but one by one. The senior executives nodded toward her, not out of fear, but respect. Natalie Carter was no longer just the founder's daughter. She was the future. Later that week, Elise's office was empty. The HR report listed it simply as personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. No tantrums this time. No high heels clicking across the floor. She had left as quietly as Natalie had once entered. Natalie walked into the empty room and stood silently for a moment. Not with glee, not with vengeance, but with a soft understanding. She whispered to herself, "Pain can either poison you or purify you." Then she turned off the lights and gently shut the door. That chapter was closed. Natalie didn't fire half the company. She didn't bring a wrecking ball instead. She brought changes so subtle they felt like morning light, weekly gratitude circles, anonymous feedback boxes, mentorship programs for interns, a kindness code on every floor. She noticed names, celebrated small wins, caught people doing things right, and slowly, quietly, the cold silent hallways turned warmer. People smiled more, greeted each other, stayed late not out of fear, but because they cared. Natalie's kindness wasn't loud, but it was deep, and it spread like spring, across frostbitten ground. One evening, Natalie stayed late, finishing a proposal. She caught her reflection in the glass wall. For a second, she paused. The woman staring back at her was composed, peaceful. Wiser, her eyes didn't hold the fear they once did. They held calm fire. She reached for the photograph of her father on her desk, smiling, still guiding, still here. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't become them, became me." Outside, the city lights twinkled like blessings. Inside, a legacy had finally found its truest air, and she was just getting started. 3 months passed. The company was steady, flourishing in quiet strength. One rainy Thursday, a letter arrived. At Elise's apartment, no return address, just her name written in soft. Cursive. She frowned, curious. She opened it with hesitation. The paper was creamy. Folded neatly inside was a single handwritten note. Not long, not bitter. Just this: "Sometimes pain is a mirror. Sometimes it's a map. You hurt me, and I thank you, because you reminded me who I never want to become. I forgive you. I hope one day you find softness again." Elise sat in silence. For the first time in a long while, her heart didn't race with superiority. It ached, gently, truthfully. She walked over to the mirror in her hallway. No makeup, no high ponytail, just Elise, without power, without performance. And she stared. For the first time in months, she didn't see the woman who won. She saw the woman who lost herself chasing shadows. She whispered, "What did I become?" Tears welled up, not loud or dramatic. Just honest. Natalie hadn't written to shame her. She had written to set them both free. Forgiveness is heavy to hold, but even heavier to deny. Elise didn't return to that company, but something shifted inside her. She started volunteering at a youth shelter. No social media posts, no speeches, just quiet evenings helping girls find their voices. One night, a girl asked her, "Were you always this kind?" And Elise replied, not proudly, but truthfully, "No. I had to lose everything to find it." It wasn't a redemption arc in the movies. It was real, raw, and slowly, she began healing. Kindness was foreign to her before. Now it felt like a lifeline, far across the city. Natalie stood on her office balcony. The wind teased the edges of her scarf. She looked up at the sky. Same clouds drifting above Elise, too, maybe. Elise had read the letter by now. Maybe she hadn't. It didn't matter. Natalie didn't need an apology. She had let go. Forgiveness was never for Elise. It was for her own peace. She smiled at the stars. "You don't have to win to be powerful," she whispered. "You just have to stay kind when the world isn't." And with that, she walked inside. Natalie never chased the spotlight, but her quiet leadership became something people whispered about in awe. The woman who listened more than she spoke, the founder who sat with interns at lunch, the one who remembered birthdays and asked, "How's your mom doing?" People didn't follow her because she demanded it. They followed because she made them feel safe, seen, valued. Her team grew from 5 to 50, then 500, but her core never changed. She still wore the same soft scarves, still carried tea. Instead of coffee, still paused to comfort crying assistants in hallways. She became something rare in the corporate world, respected, not feared, trusted, not idolized, every Sunday. Natalie visited the small diner, the same corner booth, the same tea. She never said the name aloud, but everyone knew she came for someone who once served tables and gave Coke-stained shirts a second. Chance Maya, now in college, sometimes joined her. They'd laugh over pancakes and talk about books and life. Once Maya asked, "Why do you still come here?" "You've outgrown this place." Natalie smiled softly. "You never outgrow kindness. You just return to it." And that was Natalie, rooted, unshaken, not because she had never been broken, but because she had learned to rebuild. Years later, company was profiled in a national magazine. The journalist asked, "What's the secret to your success?" Natalie replied, "Humiliation and healing. Both changed me." She didn't name Elise. She didn't need to. But the world felt her grace in the way she answered. She said, "The lowest moments teach us our highest values. I built my company on dignity, because I once stood where it didn't exist." People cried reading her words, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. She didn't just build a business. She built a culture, a refuge, a quiet rebellion against cruelty. One afternoon, a letter arrived at her office, unmarked. But inside was a small, plain card. It read, "Thank you for not becoming like me. I'm learning slowly, but because of you." There was no signature, but Natalie didn't need one. She closed her eyes and smiled, because sometimes the legacy we leave behind isn't a building with our name on it. It's the way someone else decides to be better. Just because we were kind first, Natalie folded the letter, tucked it in her desk drawer, and went on with her day. Peacefully, years passed. Natalie's company flourished, quietly leading in ethics and innovation. One day, an invitation arrived. An exclusive charity gala hosted by a powerful network of CEOs. Natalie almost tossed it aside. Crowds weren't her thing anymore, but something tugged at her heart. She decided to go. Not to prove anything, but maybe to see if the world had changed, or stayed the same. She wore a soft lavender dress. No diamonds. No designer labels. Just the same scarf from the day Elise had thrown Coke on her. That was no longer a memory of shame. It was a badge of grace. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, soft jazz. Natalie moved through the crowd gently, offering quiet smiles, kind nods. Then she saw her across the room. Elise, still beautiful, still poised, but different. There was no entourage now, no noise, just a woman standing alone at the bar, sipping wine slowly like she was waiting for something that might never come. Their eyes met. Elise's breath caught, and for a moment, the whole room faded. There was no ballroom, just two women and a story left unfinished. Elise approached. First, her voice trembled. Can I say something?" Natalie nodded softly. "You don't have to forgive me," Elise whispered, "but I need you to know I've lived with regret. I don't want pity. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Truly, Natalie didn't rush to speak. She let silence do what words sometimes cannot. Then she said, "I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, but for me. Hate is too heavy to carry." Tears welled in Elise's eyes. She wasn't expecting grace, but that was. Natalie, always a surprise wrapped in stillness. They stood there, as two women from different worlds, once divided by cruelty, now joined by growth. Elise reached out hesitant. Unsure, Natalie stepped forward and embraced her, not out of obligation, but because healing had space for even that. The room didn't notice. No gas bulbs. No gasps. Just two souls finding closure, Elise whispered. "You didn't just forgive me. You changed me." Natalie smiled, then gently stepped back. Then maybe it was all worth it. They parted ways quietly, not as enemies, not even as friends, but as women who had walked through fire, didn't let it burn them bitter. Years later, Natalie walked through the sunlit corridor of her own corporate headquarters. She paused by the front desk. A young woman stood there nervously, holding a coffee, papers clutched to her chest. Her eyes darted across the lobby like she didn't belong. Natalie recognized that look, the one she herself had once worn. She walked over. "First day?" she asked gently. The girl nodded. I'm Just an intern. I think I'm already lost. Natalie smiled warmly. Well, then you're exactly where you should be. Let me show you around. And just like that, she passed the torch. Not with a grand gesture, but with kindness. People often ask Natalie what power felt like. Was it flying in private jets? Being named on Forbes lists? Owning patents and holding keys to boardrooms? She'd shake her head every time. No, she'd say softly. Power is how gently you treat people when no one's watching. It's refusing to become like the ones who tried to break you. That's what she taught her teams. Not just how to lead, how to listen, how to stand firm without stepping on anyone. Else she never needed to raise her voice. Her calm was louder than thunder. Her quiet had weight. One morning, a handwritten letter arrived at her office. It was from Elise. No return address, just these words. I've started mentoring young women now. I tell them about the girl I once humiliated and how she showed me more dignity than I deserved. You changed me, Natalie. I hope one day I can do for someone else what you did for me without even trying. Natalie closed the letter with tearful eyes. The story had come. It's full circle, not with revenge, but redemption. She tucked the letter into a journal titled Things Worth Remembering, as the sun dipped behind her office window, painting the sky. In strokes of honey and rose, Natalie sat back in her chair. She thought of the coke-soaked blouse, the sting of shame, the whispers in the elevator, the betrayal in Elise's eyes. She thought of how she'd almost left that day, quietly, and how life had whispered stay. Now, she wasn't just the founder's wife. She was her own woman, built from grace, grit, and 1,000 small kindnesses. She closed her laptop, stood up, and walked out not as a boss, not as a survivor, but as a revolution in soft footsteps. Her quiet changed everything. The end.